My pleasure. All right. I'd say we can start. And I'm really happy if you keep your video on because it gives me the feeling that I'm talking to people. But no pressure. So welcome, welcome. Hi, Linda. So I want to maybe share a little bit about me. Um, as you might already know, my name is Alexander, and I was born in a community, a spiritual community, and we were mainly focused on silence. And about 23 years later, I came across my teacher of light language, and when I discovered that, there was a big relief in a sense, because there was a recognition that finally I have found, in a sense, in the tangible world or in the material world, a representation of a language that I already knew was very much present in my life. And finally, I found, in a way, a tool that allows me to explore deeper this language that I was feeling. I'm sorry, I'm just having something on my screen and I don't know why now it's not good. All right. So this webinar, which is going to dive into the secrets of sacred geometry, it has also a specific purpose on focusing on explaining what the mechanics and what is light language, and the form of light language that I have learned is a form that comes from the Mexicans and Mayans, from the shamans in South America, from a specific village in Veracruz, where this wisdom has been passed down generation after generation in this village. And the tales say that the original people that gave this wisdom to the shamans there were extraterrestrial. And so this light language is three-dimensional shapes. And I will show you in a second. So I started this webinar and I wanted to start it with a quote from an extra-dimensional being. We will dive deeper into what this all means. Maybe some of you know this name, Saint Germain, the Ascended Master Saint Germain. And there is a beautiful quote that I feel is very relevant for what we're going to study today. So Saint Germain says, "I will release the technology of the Aquarian age when the nations shall have put behind them the destructive uses of science and religion, to accept the challenge which lies at the heart of both, which is for man to enter his heart and the nucleus of the atom, and to harness from both the unlimited spiritual and physical resources to establish the golden age." So this is what we're going to do today. So what is sacred geometry? So here you have a representation on the left side of light language, the language that I teach and I study since more than 4 years. And I first need to share a little disclaimer that I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here to share what works for me and what I found really amazing and what helped me and what empowered me. And therefore, I'm here today to share with you, because of simple enthusiasm and excitement about this topic, I'm sharing with you what has empowered me and therefore I hope it will empower you. So, what is sacred geometry? Let's dive into it. Sacred geometry is a mirror of the mystic laws of creation. So, I don't know if you're familiar with this symbol. The symbol is Metatron's cube, and Metatron is an archangel. And in the story of the angels and archangels, archangels are the first splitting from the oneness, are the first beings that are after, let's say, God, if one believes in God. And Metatron, the archangel of Metatron, is the archangel that is the keeper of geometries. He's the one that creates the geometries in our universe. Therefore, that's why I put Metatron's cube here. Now, when we dive deeper into this definition of sacred geometry as a mirror of the mystic laws of creation, I find it important to dive deeper into what are the meanings that are being put in this sentence. So what is mysticism? Mysticism refers to the belief of a direct experience of the transcendent reality or God. So what does transcendence mean? Transcendence means to go beyond. And what means God? Because we might have all different opinions of what God is. God means being omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, and omnibenevolent, as well as having an eternal and necessary existence. So, again, in this idea, in what mysticism is, this direct experience of God or the transcendent reality, the transcendent reality for me, if I can define it in terms, means the reality that has both absolute value and relative value that will then be experienced as one thing. So again, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to understand what this all means. Maybe for you not. What does this mean? These terms can be difficult to understand because it is conveyed through a relative way, words. We use some kind of sound out of our mouth and we put a meaning onto it. And yeah, in a sense, we're sometimes hoping that we get understood, but we rely on what the others have put as a meaning onto it and how they interpret also feelings. And therefore, there can be a lot of confusion happening just by using words. Therefore, yeah, words can lose, in a sense, meaning. But what is meaning? Meaning is the denotation, referent, or idea associated with a word or a phrase, right? We have like a feeling and we like put it onto a word and then we give a meaning to a word. So, but we're talking about an association. Who talks about association says there are two subjects at least, right? Because there is the word, there's the feeling, and we associate. So there are two subjects. Now, big question for all of you. What does the world mean to you? Each of us have and make different associations, relationships, and eventually definitions about the world, right? We each have our individual perspective of how we look at the world. But to what do you associate the world? Right? We're all looking outwards, but like, what is being associated with that outward? It's you, it's me, it's the self. But if we differentiate the self from the world, what is the self? Bring a little bit more clarity. It's the inside, right? We have the outer and we have the inside. The inside, the inner perspective, the subjective, where you produce your thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, the place where you make your choices. So in here we have this picture, right, of like we have an eye and we look outside the outside world and we receive the image inside. And even though we have all kinds of things that are happening inside, there is this communication happening between the outer and the inner. So if we look for the mystical experience, We're looking to merge, fusion, and unify the subjective self with the objective self. This is the mystical experience, right? Again, we have the objective, the subjective. The world is experienced only truly as a reflection of the self. In the end, the objective and the subjective is the self. How does sacred geometry play in all of this? How does sacred geometry teach the mystic laws? The fact that the subjective world and the objective world have a relationship indicates that there must be a connection, a bridge. Who says bridge says structure. Who says structure says geometry. Who says geometry and the unification of objective and subjective says sacred geometry. So let's find out what a geometry is. Before we jump into geometry and the nature of dimensions, let's have a better understanding what the subjective and the objective perspectives are by laying some foundation. So first of all, nothing can be described directly. Very important statement, right? We're saying in the beginning, we look for this experience and we're using all these words we're trying to describe, but in reality, we cannot describe what it is. The unity of all things can only be described as indescribable, a self-contradictory description. But even ordinary things cannot be described directly. What are describable are the attributes of a thing. A being has attributes, but a being is not the attributes. Attributes are divided parts of a being, not the being itself. So, when we're describing, we're using like polarity games in the sense to get as close as possible to actually what we're trying to mean. But in reality, the experience is so unique, it cannot actually be shared or described, let's say like that. It can be shared, but maybe not described. For this reason, every living creature can only understand unity, or God, to the extent to which it itself is able consciously to experience, manifest, and realize unity. That is, to the extent to which it itself can be unity. Unity can be divided into any number. The number of divisions signal the kind of divisions. So here I've put the circle and an infinite line, because these are sometimes referred to symbols that represent God, because it's undivided. In a circle, it's full, and an infinite line, it's infinite. Plus there is a little wink of the phi symbol, but we'll get into that. Duality is found everywhere, classically called the objective and the subjective, what we were already talking. The two parts of duality each relate to their complement like time and space. Everything has both objective and subjective extensions into time and space and is on the diagonal of both. So I'm just clearing up what I mean by objectivity and subjectivity. Objectively, all things are different from all other things. So an objective perspective is to look at life by making differences, by saying this is different from that. Subjectivity, all things or events are similar to all other things in the abstract perspective and process of being. So, for example, in this picture below where we see the man, the rock, and the ant, the man and the rock are more similar in terms of weight compared to the ant, but the man and the ant is more similar in terms of biological complexity compared to the stone. So it's just like you can always see the objectivity about things and the subjectivity about things. All things are endlessly similar to all other things, and all things are endlessly different from all other things too. And as a symbol, I've put as objectivity, I've put two perpendicular lines, right? It's different. And subjectivity, two parallel lines, like they're similar to one another. Here you have some words. These words are not multidimensional words, I'm just trying to put some kind of logic for you to understand. I can totally resonate and understand if you see some kind of thing that is not perfect, but that's not the point. So for every entity, there is the self and the not self. Both the self and the not self make exchanges in their own realm and in the other realm as well. Similarity means similarity to the self. Difference means difference from the self. The concrete is the quantities of qualities. The abstract is the qualities of quantities, which can also be related with that relative and absolute. Here we have a nice graph, energy from the self to the self, subjective universe, from the self to the not self, it's the outflow. The objective universe from the not self to the not self, it's objective. And the inflow from the not self to the self. All things resonate to different degrees in the concrete and in the abstract. It is the objective and the subjective. All things are both objective and subjective. Remember, it's just a matter of changing your perspective. Objectively, all things or events are different from all other things, yet all perspectives or viewpoints share the same pervasive, repeatable physical reality. Subjectively, all things or events are similar to all other things in innumerable ways, yet every entity has its own unique subjective reality. I hope we're starting to get the point. I will just skip a little bit. So, next, if now we start to look at the universe in a division of four, not a duality, but a quaternity. One reality you get is mass, energy, space, and time. Einstein's full equation reduces to the famous E equal mc2 for objects at rest. Further simple algebra shows the four objective elements of existence, mass, energy, space, and time as a proportional array as simple as 1:2, as 5:10. So what I'm trying to show you here is just by transforming this equation of E equal mc2, we can say that there is energy and mass equals to space and time. Just there is some kind of relationship that we can put when we divide the universe in those four elements. Now, in this universe of mass, energy, space, and time are the field of action. Every object in the field of action consists of both mass and energy together in all cases, even though only observed as one or the other ever. So we have energy and mass on one side, and we have space and time on the other. What I call energy and mass, I call it the objects, and it's either seen as energy or mass. So there is a dichotomy. It's always different like the objectivity. And then we have the field of action. There is always space and time, and they always are together. They are inseparable. So that's what is being called the field of action. And this is a continuum, right? Space and time are always together. So dichotomy relates closer to a difference and objectivity. A continuum relates closer to a sameness and subjectivity. I'm just putting a parallel here. Now, something interesting. In space, we have three axes of space are mutually perpendicular, right? We have this, you can see it on the picture here. And in time, just like space, there are actually three axes of time, but they are parallel to each other, not perpendicular. They flow along together. We have the present, the future, and the past, and they're parallel to one another. So events like the existence of objects occur in the past, the present, and the future. As waves, all objects in the present resonate with each other to exist as standing waves. The resonant energy of object can reflect upon the past and project into the future. Resonating in a dynamic and constantly changing present is the event of being. All things resonate with all other things. Being is change. Being is having resonant interface with all other things in the here and now, which is motion, and processing those changes in space and time. No change means no existence in the present. All things have the ultimate goal of continuing to be and do the actions that further that continuation. So in a sense here, we establish also the understanding that only the present exists, and the past and the future are reflections from this very moment. Energy waves occur via or on opposing tensions. Resonant waves exist in exact numbers of waves per space. So I'm not going to read everything here, but just to let you know, basically on the quantum level, so when we have a standing wave, which you see here a line here and a line there, and between those two fixed points can come a certain amount of waves. What this page is just saying that these numbers can only be whole numbers, meaning you cannot have like 3.5 waves. So you will either have 3 or 4 or 5, but no any more in between. That's what is happening at the quantum level. Resonance is a standing wave, which can be straight or curved. Two standing waves can be parallel or perpendicular. Interesting, no? We bring again the parallel and the perpendicularity in physics of waves. So waves can be straight and reflect, or they can be circular and they can project, which come also to this idea of past and future. Perpendicular and parallel waves can be in phase or out of phase. So when two parallel lines are in phase, resonance increases. So when you have like your waves, if you have like a nice amount of waves with the distance, then the resonance will increase. If you don't have like a nice amount of waves in this distance, then it will decrease the resonance. Now, when two perpendicular waves are in phase, the intersection is a straight diagonal line. So you see here the perpendicularity, and you have one motion that goes up and down, and the second one that goes right and left. Now, if you go up and to the right at the same time, that's what they mean by in phase. If you push up and on the side at the same time, what happens? You move in diagonal. So that's what they mean. If it's in phase, you go into a diagonal line. Now, when two waves are out of phase, the intersection is a circle. So if I would go first up, then to the right, then down, then to the left, then up, then you're always actually turning in circles. And that's out of phase because the two waves are not going together, they're going after one another. And what then is happening is that you have then the energy that is local. It stays around the same place, whereas when it is in phase, it goes global, it goes forever. From a metaphysical perspective, the two waves going in two directions of motion resonate with each other in both their positive and negative expression of competition and cooperation, destructive and constructive interference. As competitors, the objective and subjective oppose each other at 180 degrees. So in this one, if you just have one line and you have subjectivity and objectivity on the other side, and you're in the center, you will either be pulled or pushed. Like if they try to compete with one another, you either have only a subjective or only an objective perspective. But as cooperators, if you put now the two perspectives on a 90-degree angle, right, and you pull on the objective and the subjective, you go into a diagonal, and you will have a proportional amount of objectivity and subjectivity, but they will always be together. So they will, in a sense, they will work together. So, next chapter, science of imprinting, simulation, and memory. By the way, if you have any question, feel free to just write them in the chat, and then I might answer them straight away or when the time is ripe. So, to symbolize is to embed. Getting the hologram inside you in phase with the hologram outside of you is the origin of psychokinesis. We will go deeper into these pictures later. How come we can associate meaning to symbols? Like computers, our systems store, recognize, and manage information based on a binary system. What is the self and what is not the self? What allows imprinting in your being is the attachment you give to it. Like, I want you just to like imagine the touch that you get, like what kind of the imprint, what it does on your being, to feel maybe a soft touch, or when you walk on the beach, the imprint that you leave in the sand, or when you get punched in the face, or an argument that you have with someone, like what it leaves you after. And the amazement you have with the news, or the when you play a game and suddenly you can believe in some other kind of story, you displace yourself into something. You kind of go out of your own body and story, you go into a virtual story. Antonio, I saw you wrote a message and then it deleted. Is there something you want to say?
No, not important for now.
Okay. So, and you would only give attachment to what is sense making. And an attachment can also be synonym for meaning, or an attachment of information. So, what is sense making? The recognition as it being you, right? With this binary system, what is the self? What is not the self? We're filtering information like that. So, who are you? What is that self? So we had opened the subject of cooperative resonance and competitive resonance, constructive and destructive wave interference. Humans have both the objective and subjective identities. This is the fun thing about humans. As physical bodies, we are objects, but as conscious being, we are also subjects. And so when we just think about it, the when we are in this global in phase perpendicular energy, we're more like souls. We're like this, we're energy, we're infinite, we are eternal, we are omni. And in our physical bodies, we're more finite, we're limited, we're localized, we're somewhere. And therefore, the nature of our physical reality is incompatible with our soul's reality. And there is this struggle that I experience very strongly. By the way, here is a little image that is maybe interesting of how waves, like if you put two mirrors, you have a reflection between the mirrors, and also through the mirrors, you have a projection, how, future, past, all exist in the present. Here you can see a little animation of, what is when you push the up and the side at the same time, you get the diagonal. And if they are out of phase, then you get the circle. And as you can see, this is more like a mass, it's somewhere, and it is more mortal and competitive, in like resistance in the sense of change, and it is somewhere and lesswhere in the other sense. Whereas here, in the soul like energy, you are eternal, cooperative, everywhere and nowhere at the same time. So here again, so we are this physical body, we are this soul, and the magic is that we can see it. We can actually become aware that we are this duality, and we can have it united under consciousness itself. We'll go deeper into what consciousness is. So what are the parameters you gave yourself? Like, this is my question for every single one of you. What are the parameters you gave yourself to come into this life? You are an infinite being who chose to experience a finite existence. You are a continuum and a dichotomy at the same time. And like, I put this picture of the tuning fork, where like the resonance, the frequency here is like your soul. You can infect your energy into all of matter, and you can experience even beyond your physical body. But your body is this dichotomy. You're just here and nowhere else. So your physical body is incompatible to your soul, yet can reflect through rhythms, cycles, tunings, ratio, dimensions, and timings the eternal harmony your soul embodies. And we'll go deeper in that. Only when two waves are out of phase, they can create a local experience, We often search the identity to be as concrete as possible. We try to identify. But your identity, if your identity were to be hyperdimensional, and we will go deeper into what does it mean hyperdimensional, you would be everywhere in the lower dimensions. For example, if you would be a cube and you take just a part of that cube as a square within that cube, the cube is everywhere on the square, but is also much more than just that square. It's everywhere, and paradoxically also nowhere. As such, this exhibits similar qualities of a global experience on that two-dimensional plane of two waves in phase. One way to acknowledge higher dimensional patterns is by recognizing that we have senses that bridge the inside with the outside, not only by using sight, but the sense of feeling. We can also feel resonance. In fact, here's a model that might describe easily a comparison between seeing and feeling. New idea, Buckminster Fuller, a big guy about geometry who created the geodesic domes, amazing stuff. He saw two triangles become a tetrahedron. For him, a triangle exists in 3 dimensions with overlapping vertices. This is the holistic minimum of information. I think this is really genius. So you see here 2 dimensions, but yet they're arranged in 3 dimensions. And when you overlap them, you get a tetrahedron. In a flow around a triangle, one aspect of these triangles is best expressed by MC Escher visually. The opposing bistable resonance is uphill in one direction and downhill in the other direction. So you can see this triangle is actually a resonance of standing waves. And he represented it like this. It's like you seem like you go down one way and you go up the other way. And they're both in the same triangle, with one having more that objective perspective, the loss of potential and disorganization, and also the syntropy, the cooperative, the subjective, the gain of potential organization. Watch out, I just said objective and subjective as competition and cooperation. It's wrong, you're right. It's just one perspective. We can see it as well as being a subjective point of view that is competitive. Just being careful here. So when we put those 2 triangles together of the objective and subjective, now we add even another layer onto it. And let's say it's the field of action that we are going to layer over those objective and subjective perspectives, where on the objective perspective of being, one of the fundamental states that we can have objectively, can be interpreted subjectively either as feeling, either as knowing, either as resonating. Doing on the objective side can be either feeling, knowing, or resonating. Having in the objective perspective can be feeling, knowing, or resonating. The field of action is the continuum. It's both at the same time. But if we go to the objective, to the mass and energy aspect of the objective and subjective perspective, I find this very interesting. And for me, it resonates again. Energy is information on the subjective perspective. Mass in the objective perspective is energy from the subjective perspective. Information on the objective perspective is mass in the subjective perspective. And I'm just playing around. What if we just merge those 2 triangles together, or tetrahedrons? We get Merkabahs. And again, Merkabahs, how do you want to interpret them? I've read that it probably is the shape of a proton. Protons is basically light, which is the source of all our physical reality. It's the abundance of forms and spirits. Can also be seen as above, so below. Having one side, spirit, the other side matter, one side service to others, one side service to self. Or we can play also with this space and time, where we say one triangle is space, It's the width, height, length in the now. And the other one is the time. It's the present, the past, and the future in the here. And the Merkaba has many names. It's called also a star tetrahedron or a stellated octahedron. Also, these names are actually have codes and have energies. And if you want to study light language, you actually learn about families. It's really, really deep. It's very powerful. And again, if we can polarize, we can have, on the one side, the feeling, the seeing, let's like the absorption and the emission. And I'm already showing you some information. I will go deeper into it. Gravity and radiation. I will explain you that. And also about the torus. Or another perspective, we have the higher self, the lower self, and the middle self beautifully merging. So another aspect I find very important to state, free will and making a discernment about mechanical and moral positivity and negativity. What is positivity and what is negativity? There is a difference between positive mechanical energies and negative mechanical energies, and positive moral and negative. So what I mean by it, positive energies can be described as unifying, bringing together, like in general, the term positive. And negative energies can be described as segregating, separating. All things stand as a neutral phenomena in physical reality. Like literally our physical reality is just neutral. We give a meaning to what physical reality is with our own beliefs, our own story, with our own background. We say this is good or this is bad. But some things bond together through a positive mechanical energy, but have a negative moral factor, or like we can say it's negative, but mechanically something positive is happening. As such, I'd like to highlight our choice to engage into constructive wave interference with reality as moral positivity. So, and our choice to engage into destructive wave interference with reality as moral negativity. So if you experience your physical life in a positive way, then for me, you're merging the subjective and the objective in a cooperative way. Whereas if you experience it as something negative, then you're competing in a sense with physical reality. You're not working with. And I find it just very important to state that we all have the same power to decide how we experience physical reality. So, continuing in sense making, there are different gradation of meaning, depths of print at different levels. How deeply are you touched by life in this moment? How much do you allow life to have an effect on you right now? How much do you touch, participate of, or in life? Just ask yourself the question right now. Just get a little feeling, a glimpse of where you're at. To take a moment inside instead of outside. So here's a little model. What if your memory system is as a barometer of plasticity? So what if your memory would be like rock, and you would slice it in two, and you would get basically a broken rock? And what if your psyche would be that hard that you have this brokenness in you, which we usually term as, trauma? But what if your memory would be like sand, and you make this line, you can see it, but over time, or you just put a hand and you can heal it and it's again flat? Or what if it is like water? You just see the ripple effects and that's it. There's not even a trace of a trauma. Or what if it is even air? There's nothing. So there is some kind of development in our nervous system that we can do to approach physical reality. So how much do you own your own life? If you are to be, you must behave what you are to be. Star Fuentes is the lineage holder of the wisdom of light language today. And she's still alive. Very special woman. Owning all levels of reality, honoring all levels of your being allows you to shift more readily into more of who you really are at a spiritual level. For me, the spiritual level is the level where you feel where you are one with everything. And yeah, one with also the duality and the separation. So owning the dichotomy of our physical experience and behaving in it from a cooperative continuum perspective, right? We have the up and down wave, the side. And what are we making? We're making spirals. But what is that bridge between the subjectivity and objectivity, respectively, to physicality? How can we materialize our feelings, vision, and imagination into our shared reality? Perspective dictates patterns of resonance perceived. I'm a little bit repeating myself, and we'll go deeper into the actuality of what that symbol is. But we will first take a little sideway. So here, play with perspectives. What if the I, like me, becomes an I, a neutral observer? What happens when justice becomes what just is? Something a little bit more alive than a judgment. What happens when your immunity is feeling the state of unity? Patterns are structures of energy, so to observe means to resonate. Resonance is a reinforcement and a persistence in undulating. Persistence means being attuned to resonate with the whole. Entities that do not resonate do not persist. This is somewhat the concept of consciousness. Aha, now we're going into consciousness. So what is consciousness? There needs to be an observer, the way of observing, and the object that is being observed. And so there is a fixed beginning, there is a moving element, the site, and there's a fixed end. So there is this thing about like, it's the same like a camera. A camera, like you take a snapshot, right? And like you get a picture. But how come that the camera can have a picture? It's because there is the observer, the camera, there is light in between that is moving, and it is being reflected upon the object that is being observed by the camera. And only then can there be this self-awareness. So what is interesting about consciousness is that three subjects become one. Consciousness is that thing that unites several things. The recognizer, the recognized, and the recognition are one and the same. The self, the creator, recognizes itself in itself. Man can only experience God in this way. God in his state of resting within himself is 1 in 3 and 3 in 1. 1 and 3 are still an unseparated unity. And therefore, this exists in the dimensionless world. Yes. When God enters the creative aspect in space and time, it manifests as the number 4, which is 3 and 1. And you can see in our reality of 3 dimensions, the most basic shape is the tetrahedron. The tetrahedron has 4 faces and has 4 points. And here I just unfolded the 4 triangles. But you can see how this is 3 in 1. And now we have the 3 and 1, 4. So let us go into a little journey of dimensionalization, dimensions. So let us begin with the beginning of creation, and let us start with nothingness, total nothingness. And there is just nothing. But at some point, the nothingness realizes that nothingness is something. And a crystallization happens, a birth, concentrated existence in a single point. And out of this concentrated existence, because it came from nothingness to something, there comes a relationship, and a line starts to happen between, thank you, Linda, between nothingness and something, and a line starts to occur. And out of the point, a line happens, and the line stretches out to infinity. It goes beyond the point and beyond the 2 points, on both directions. Now, the line not only sees it can move in one direction, but it can move into another direction. And it turns and turns and turns and starts to form a plane, stretching out to infinity, a thin, thin plane. We have 2 dimensions. We have up and away. And now that it is stretching to infinity, this plane realizes that it can also move into another direction, upness, downness, and it starts to form a volume. And out of this volume, the question is, where does it go next? And so I've put here time, because from the beginning on, this point, when it travels through time, it creates a line. When a line travels through time, it creates a plane. And when a plane travels through time, it creates a volume. But what does a volume through time create? What is that next dimension? So it's impossible to actually represent it in our reality because we live in 3 dimensions, not the 4th one. I mean, not physically at least. And we try to represent it, and we make animations, and we can make some shadow forms. And so what we came up with shadow forms is the tesseract, the hypercube, is this. And in order to represent it best as we can, it keeps on moving because it's the cube in movement through time. And it creates this crazy, weird shape. And what this is, it's basically 7 cubes within a shape. It is 1 cube, like 1 cube here. I mean, it doesn't look like a cube, but it would actually be a cube. Here is another cube. There would be on every face, there would be a cube. And when you enter 1 cube, it is completely a different cube than any other room you would enter. And there is a cube also in the center. No, 7. I did 42 faces. Yeah. I know that it's like 6 faces, 1 on the outside, 1 on the inside. I understand that you asked for the 8, but the outer would be, or at least from the information I had, it's 7 cubes. And I understand your perspective that it's 8, which is arguable still. So now you start to have an understanding how time starts to create the next dimension. Here's a little text. I'm not going through it. This is for the people if they want to rewatch and read this. I think it's super interesting. Anyway, time creates the next dimension. Let's break it down in the other way around. So we live now in the fourth dimension. We live in 3 spatial dimensions and 1 dimension of time. Now, when we take a movie, we film it, and we then show it on the screen, like you're watching right now. You're watching a screen, and your screen is in 2 dimensions, and you experience also 1 dimension of time. So there's the 3rd dimension on your computer. Now, the interesting thing, it's like when you watch a movie, there is this cursor of like, where's your movie? Is it like in the beginning or is it at the end? And we showed here one dimension, a line, and we represent this one line as time. And so we represented time into space. And we see how there is just this similarity between a line and time. Therefore, it mirrors back and it reflects back how time potentializes process, movement, inertia, space, dimensions. Everything is contained within time. Therefore, if time exists, all spatial dimensions also exist. There is an infinite number of spatial dimensions. And we experience right now the 3rd dimension physically. Time is overlaid as a gradient in each dimension. So this is also a super cool idea. So you're probably familiar with this idea that, if you travel at the speed of light, then time slows down relative to the other people. So let's say you're in a spaceship that can go at the speed of light, and you're going to the neighbor's star at 15 light years away. You jump into the spaceship, you go there, and you come back. For you, it was just 30 seconds, and for the people around you, it was 30 years. So when you are moving super fast and taking a lot of space by moving so fast, you experience less time. And when you move very slowly, you experience the most time, like we do right now. Now, I link this idea with another theory called the single electron theory. The single electron theory says that basically in our whole universe, everything is just made out of 1 particle. And the idea is that let's imagine that this particle is in a space that has no friction and that can basically, it has no limitation. So this little particle or whatever it is can move infinitely fast. And the idea is, what if there is a point here and then it flickers here and then it flickers here and here and here and here, and it does it so fast that it appears that the point is at 2 locations at the same time. This is how, in this concept, then a line would be, for example, created, is if this ball would move so fast that it looks like the ball is taking up the whole space of 1 dimension. Now, it must move at a certain speed in order to cover up, in a sense, the illusion that it covers up 1 line. Now, if we want to cover up as well another dimension, like the 2nd dimension, it would need to multiply, it would need to add more speed to also cover up another dimension. And it would have to cover up, if it wants to cover up another dimension, it would also have to add up again more speed. So in every dimension, there is kind of a limit of speed in order to see movement or no movement in that dimension. And so my understanding is that the limit of speed in our dimension is the speed of light, which is actually not the right terminology to say it's the speed of light, but it's c, it's the speed of causality. Although change is always happening in reality, we experience a dichotomous reality that can look like it changes so slow that it appears as if it didn't change. Speed is relative. I just said something a little bit about that. you can if somebody would be standing here, they would all like move pretty fast away, those different planes. But if I would be in this plane doesn't move so fast, or actually this one moves a little bit slower than this one. So there is like this play, like speed is something very relative in our experience of dimensions. So the question is like, is there something not relative in our existence? And what several tribes around the world, ancient wisdom tribes, they came up with a set of laws that describe those things that never change in our existence. And they have different names. There's the Hermetic laws, and there are different numbers of laws that they have found. Some have found 12, some 7, some 35. I came across information that showed 105 universal laws, as they call them. And I also know another source, which I enjoy very much, which is basically boiling it all down into just 5 laws. And those 5 laws is: 1, you exist. Try to not exist. 2, everything is here and now. I think we touched already a bit upon that. And this law gives us the experience of oneness in being. The third law is: what you put out is what you get back, which gives us the feeling of reflection and attraction. The fourth one is: the all is the one is the all, which gives us the feeling of separation and connection. And the fifth law: everything changes except the laws. This gives us the experience of action and experience. So, and you see here this little graph on the side, with like different levels of reality. And we know today, for example, that, on this quantum level, things don't behave the same as in the physical, or I forgot what the term is. But on different levels, there are different laws that apply. So there is some kind of relativity, but in all of the different levels, these 5 laws always apply. So in our physical universe, what is the constant? What is the thing that really does stay? Because I just said, like, in the quantum level, it is different than, for example, in the physical level. So the Planck, this is an interesting one. Planck. At the Planck length, ordinary time and space cease to exist. So Planck is a distance. And basically, why is it a constant? Is because if there would be 2 photons closer to each other than the Planck length, the gravity, the attraction of one photon would pull the other photon to each other, which would create a black hole. And therefore, there cannot actually come something out. There cannot be basically a physical reality if 2 photons would be smaller, if would be closer to each other than that. Therefore, this is somehow a limit that our reality has. Why? We don't know, but it's there. But just so you also have an understanding of what distances is, this is extremely, 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 extremely small. And because also we have this distance, we can find Planck time, like how much time does light take from one Planck, like for the distance of one Planck length. And therefore we have, Planck length, Planck mass, and Planck time. So these are the measurements and where they come from. So if we would compare the size of one Planck length to an atom, it would be like 1 grain of sand to the galaxy. That's how small a Planck length is. And I will show you another number to make you maybe understand a little bit more. Right now, I'm not going to show you this video, but it's super interesting. So you see this number? This is the number of Planck time that exists within a second. It's just unbelievable how many times it happens. And what I found out in my information, in my research, and what I resonate with is that basically time is again what I was saying about this single particle thing. Time is basically static images that are successively next to one another, put so fast next to one another that it gives us the illusion that time exists. Just like a movie, just like a film strip. You know, when you're watching a movie, your movie is actually made out of frames that are put next to one another, and you just flip them enough fast. And they say usually when you put 25 pictures next to one another or frames per second, you kind of lose, or you start to, yeah, you start to get into the illusion of continuity. You don't anymore see a difference. Some people can see it. And so here you have a little example of what, how you see how it's kind of broken. This is like 50 frames per second. So you don't buy into the illusion. Here in 30 frames, you kind of buy it more into. And here you have 60 frames per second. And 60 frames per second, I heard that it actually relates to the frequency, the frames per second of our physical reality. And you might think, yeah, well, 60 frames is something, that is not that much. And I agree. And our physical reality, is, again, there are deeper layers. And so what I understand is that, like, when you, for example, go to the quantum level, it fluctuates faster than 60 frames per second. And I'm just going to share my sound so you can hear what 60 frames per second is. I won't put it for too long because it's very annoying, but I thought it's very powerful and interesting to hear. So, Antonio, I believe your question will be answered later. So in case it did not, because I think you will have your answer by yourself. But please write again if you have a doubt. So, knowing that everything is here and now, the past and the future are like parallel realities that also exist here and now as reflections and projections. It is a sequence of parallel reality that we call parallel reality. So it is a direction of parallel reality, but they all exist at the same time. You can choose any path through them. Whatever you decide yourself to be at that moment is a sequence of parallel realities you set up for yourself. But creation in its totality doesn't change. Only the reflections of the hall of mirror change, not creation. Time is an illusion. Change is an illusion, but the experience is real. So we're only existing here and now, and only because we change the perspective of creation does it give us the illusion that creation is changing, but actually the structure of creation doesn't change. I'm checking in on the time, and I'm a bit disappointed that time flies so fast. And I'm a bit like, okay, I have to cut some things. So let me maybe skip some parts. I'll pass this. So what I find important to note is that because we live in time, we already exist within higher dimensions. And I'm going to show you some, like, for example, we can see a very strong probable future in these scenarios, right? Like when you look at this picture, it does something with you. You have an emotional reaction. You have an understanding of what the future is. Therefore, you already think in higher dimensional terms. We already have intelligences of higher dimensions. And this was one of my biggest ahas for everything. Yes, anticipation, exactly. So this is a clear example that we are more actually than three-dimensional beings. And so my question was, are there even signs in our physical reality that show that higher dimensions exist? And so for me, you know, there are these pictures that we have drawn that are really amazing. Like we saw the hypercube, but this is a hyperdodecahedron. And fractality, when we look at the seashell, there is some kind of repetitive choice being done within a direction, which again relates to the idea of parallel realities. And just amazing how, you know, like music is just so corresponding to what we find in the spirals of seashells. Or, you know, many seers have seen, you know, the different layers of the aura, again, a fractal growth of our bodies. And here you have a shape, for example, of light language, where you can see a fractal nature on it. For me, it is obvious that there is a higher dimensional intelligence embedded within the structure of geometric polyhedras. This I won't go into. This is amazing too. I mean, ether, very important subject. This is maybe what's going to answer your question, Antonio. So the ether, a very hot topic in the mainstream science, because for more than 100 years, you would be kind of ridiculed if you would talk about the ether as something that existed. And therefore, we have found many other names. And there are so many philosophies that have different names for what the ether is. But what does the word ether mean? It means made of the same thing. So I was born, as I told you in the beginning, in a spiritual setting. And this was something that I was brought up with, that, you know, at the basis of our physical reality, when we go beyond the quantum level, we reach basically a field where everything comes from. And in what I was brought up with is that basically our consciousness is able to go, with the practice, we are actually able to tap into this field, which I was told was the field of pure consciousness. So basically, at the end of the 19th century, they made an experiment to prove if the ether existed, and they failed. And since then, they said it doesn't exist. And Einstein came up with his theory of general relativity, and they loved it. And later on, Einstein said, yeah, you know, actually my theory of general relativity can only exist if the ether exists, and nobody really listened to him. And in the meantime, many scientists have actually done research on the ether and came up with many positive results that prove that the ether exists, but nobody listened. So what is the ether? So today, as I said, there are many names. In mainstream quantum physics, although we say the ether doesn't exist, it is actually called vacuum energy. It is the underlying background energy that exists in space throughout the universe. It is also referred to as the zero-point energy. This is the energy that this is the energy of a system that remains when it is brought to absolute zero. The ether is literally the compressibility of charge, which behaves like a superfluid, like a plus and a minus charge, which is the compression and the rarefaction of the ether. So basically, it's superfluid that exists everywhere around you and everywhere. And it behaves like this. It can compress and decompress. So the compressibility of the ether is an important aspect, as it plays a pivotal role in the process of gravitation, electromagnetism, and mass. The compressibility of the ether causes wave to form. The pattern of that wave has only one shape. It's the sine wave. It's basically up, down. It's super simple. It's just like any wave. And when a wave in the ether moves in a line, it is called energy. When the same wave is sucked into a circle, the slight gyroscopic resistance to change the location is called matter. So if it doesn't go into a straight line and it is brought to stay on the same location, then it is matter. To say that a substance is compressible means, among other things, that it can store momentum. Momentum has a rush to grow. The momentum of ether involves movement in symmetrically opposing directions. So basically, what the ether, the only shape that it can make is like a vortex. It can only like compress, and because of the compression, it goes actually into this tornado. And this tornado is the only thing that it can stabilize from this compression and decompression. And so when you have this tornado on one side, there must be another tornado on the other side. And what you get is the torus. Another way we can look at it is just like this sine wave, when you rotate it 360 degrees, you get a torus. So we get this shape. So basically it sinks in and it has to go out. These two opposite electric conditions, which form the basis of the constitution of matter, are the compressed condition of gravity pressure and the expanded condition of radiation pressure. These two electric conditions are the equal and opposite pressures which make motion imperative and without which motion is impossible. These counterforces, when balanced, are the pressures that create stability. Right? Because like when we did this vortex, it's keeping on turning and spinning, but it created a circle that is stable. So there is some stability. This stability of pressure is matter itself. Remember, all is motion, even matter is motion. However, when these forces are balanced, they create the illusion of stability or stillness. We see unmoving matter, yet within the matter, all continues to be motion. This means the universe is made of nothing but stored pressure, or in other words, potential. I've put here in red, all continues to be motion, because we just saw this hypercube and we represented it in our reality as something that must keep on moving. I just thought, what if the basis that makes up all our universe is actually hyperdimensional in nature? When the pressure or charge rotates, momentum, it concentrates and stores inertia, definition of mass, and that rotation has a period, the concept of time. Acceleration of inertia is translated from rotation into compressional spin towards the center, which accelerates spin rate, the experience of time. That is why acceleration causes time to speed up, because of the translation of vorticity. Acceleration is gravity. The experience of gravity is charge acceleration. Right? You feel the attraction, it just never stops, right? You're always pulled. Now, the question is, how is it possible to create this always pulling to have a cooperative charge compression? Remember, competitive, cooperative? The key is to recognize that only golden ratio allows you to superpose more than 7 axes of spin non-destructively. So only the golden ratio, do you know Fibonacci sequences phi? This is the only ratio that allows a golden ratio between what and what? Very good question. The only thing that is quantized in this, the only constant that we have is the Planck. So the golden ratio from the Planck length. From there, and I will go deeper into it. But just to let you know, there are 3 simple patterns in which this oscillating sine wave articulates from the ether. There's 3 ways it expresses itself. You can see it all 3 actually in this. The first one is it can go in straight lines, which represent electricity, and the colors in light language. We have the concentric circles, the waves, which represent magnetisms and which are the shapes of light language. And we have the spirals in between, which is the movement and the transformation, and how actually the shapes and the light is being connected. So because everything is actually made out of symmetry at the ether level, the language of the ether are these most symmetrical shapes. And these are exactly the shapes that I learned and teach in light language. This is what we use. We color them and we place it and we magnify, move them. And so phase conjugation. In order to achieve materiality, because we want to create things that matter, we need weight, aka gravity. And gravity is the acceleration of charge that is continuous, infinite, and non-destructive. So I just told you about that golden ratio. You can see when we put that golden ratio in 3-dimension, if we cube it on the volume, it's the same spiral as this one put into 3-dimension. And it's being found everywhere in nature, this spiral. And when you follow the Planck length and you multiply it by phi, you get, for example, the 3. Okay, I will get there. You get, for example, the 3 exact hydrogen radii. So hydrogen is our first atom in our atomic table, and the electron shells, the distance between those electron shells are exactly following the golden ratio from the Planck length. Or, for example, photosynthesis is also happening at golden ratio from the Planck length. The foot as a measurement, Schumann resonance. And so now we have to understand, so to come to your question that you were asking, Antonio, about golden ratio between what and what. So in waves, we have transversal waves, which are up and down. And basically, transversal waves are going perpendicular to the direction of motion. So you have a line, and I'm pushing this wave to go to the right, but the wave is going up and down. That's transversal waves. So they're going up and down. Longitudinal waves are going parallel to the direction of traveling. And longitudinal waves are the waves that allows us to hear, which is sound. Yes, exactly. The orbitals are the electrons where they move. That's what I meant. I don't know if I said something else. And so charge collapse or phase conjugation, we saw a little bit about this cone. Basically, when you bring any wave that is transverse and you allow it to pass through that golden ratio, you allow it to actually attune to the Planck threshold, the Planck dimension. And from this golden ratio spiral, you're actually allowing the up and down to order and to harmonize and to actually fit and order with the Planck dimension. So there is a tuning that happens only when you follow golden ratio, which allows you to tune into the Planck dimension. And therefore, because if you follow that golden ratio, you're actually able to go into the next dimension. You're actually able to tap into consciousness, the field. So here, this picture comes from this crazy scientist, Dan Winter. It's a mess, but so you can see this vortex when it's happening. It's like a whirlpool, and it like connects you with basically the constant that exists in our whole universe. So you're basically coming into a cosmic consciousness by allowing yourself to go into that infinite charge compression, which brings you into the intelligence of the cosmos. Here you have some examples of those cones when you add them together, because actually if you just have 2, then you get a torus. And if you have 6, you get a cube. Here you have 10, you get a dodeca. And what happens when you go through the Planck threshold? You go beyond the veil. So just to remember, yeah, I think I can skip this. This is pretty cool. So when you, I want to talk about so many things. So going through that veil and going beyond that threshold, you tap into something like beyond the physical universe. So just imagine that everything that you see right in here, you would imagine, for example, there would be an emotional universe that penetrates, interpenetrates, and is bigger than the physical universe. And we actually start to poke through the metaphysical universe. So that golden ratio is basically our telephone or our way to communicate with the metaphysical. And the metaphysical communicates with the physical also through that golden ratio spiral. So allowing yourself to go through that tunnel, you experience the geometries that connect our whole universe together. And beyond the veil, beyond the mind, you can see how there is a nesting of geometries within geometries. Beyond belief are codes of consciousness, which are bleeding through our physical reality. Just look at this picture. This is the most clear picture that we could take of a human cell. And you can see that within a human cell, you see this perfect truncated icosahedron. It's a geometrical shape. Like our life follows those geometries. You can see here a stone, a perfect cube. Nature creates this. Spirals, amazing perfect geometry of crystallization of water, spider web or a flower. Like it doesn't come out of nowhere. Then we have the array. So as you can see, like this torus is making basically this connection between the physical and the metaphysical. And there is basically a network beyond what is physical, which is being named as the array here. And here about these electrons and the orbitals, we can see how we have different orbitals. There's the s orbital, the p orbital, the d, the f, and they actually each correspond to the platonic solids. Tetrahedron, the cube, the octahedron, icosahedron, dodecahedron. Here you can see the nucleus of an iron atom. It would be comprised of those geometries. And here you have again a nesting of platonic solids. Like if you just put those different platonic solids in this order, if you follow the points to one another, you exactly follow a golden ratio spiral. Here you can see again the spiral. So in which array are you in? In which network are you in? In which universal grid are you in? In which shapes are you rolling in? So I think I'm slowly going to end here because I see like wait a second. We start at 6:30 and we end at, wow, it should have already ended like a half an hour ago. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think I've got to put it to an end. I'm still like at half of my presentation, but hey, I think I'm already asking a lot from you. But yeah, I want you to maybe to think about it, like that you right now you are within you are right now within geometrical shapes, and learning light language actually brings you aware of what those geometries feel like and what they represent and what their energies are. So one shape or let's say one description I can share with you because Antonio asked, is the sphere. And the sphere is, as you can see here, imagine you are within a sphere, and being at the center of a sphere, every point on that sphere is equally distant from the center. Therefore, it gives you 360 and more, because 360 degrees is just this way, but 360 degrees of choices, of directions that you can go to. When you are within a sphere, when you go into one direction and you start to push into one direction like this kid does, the ball starts to roll, and you actually start to easily roll into a creation of your choice, a creation of your necessity, because at the center, all choices are equal. But your preference and your necessity will then be the first choice that will be taken. And the sphere is open. The sphere is very open. So whenever you need to open up yourself, emanate a sphere around you, open up. So this is a little sneak peek into what what I will teach. And basically, like right now, I've blown and I've thrown into your face lots of mindy information. If you come to, and if you're interested in learning light language, it's a very experiential class. So it's much less mindy, and it's much more just feeling and experiencing, and then asking how can we actually use it in a practical way. Yes, you want to please inform us how we can co-create with this language a wonderful world. Come to my class. There are different levels. Level 1 is the basic shapes, level 2, and level 3 is like a totally different level. These hours are still subject to change. It depends on like how fast we learn, and yeah, I adapt myself to the students. And there are other advanced classes that we can learn. Yeah, like in the first level, you learn 7 shapes. In the second, you learn 16, and on the third one, you learn 150, something like this. And it's just very, very big. It's very, very big. And even though you will finish the class, there will be still months, maybe years of still learning after that. And this language is alive. I mean, I cannot say enough about it. As today, my presentation was also longer than I expected. Oh, but just let me just make a last point to wrap up actually the intention of this webinar, which was about showing this bridge, right? What bridges the subjective with the objective. And I just want to make a last point. You know, we can see that we can unify basically dimensions in one line through spirals, right? If we have an up and a down, we can make a spiral this way. If we have 3 dimensions, we have a spiral we have a 3-dimensional spiral, and we just have one line, but we keep on changing the directions. And so when applying this idea, it is like cymatics. You know, one single frequency adjusts a reality to it. Right, you can break a glass just by having the right frequency, or you can make different shapes that get more and more complex the higher the frequency. And this spiral is what creates the torus. And like this film strip that we were thinking, what if the torus would be basically the movie where you are within the torus, within your own torus, Like the vertical side of the torus is the inside, and you see the inside of the torus every time, and it keeps on changing because of the nature of torus, and everything is just a reflection of yourself. A torus is a doorway, and when following the spiral, you are the way of the door. You're merging really from with that spiral, you're merging that, like that duality or that trinity, like consciousness does it, but in a manifest way. So this is our bridge, this is our power, this is our doorway to mysticism, and sacred geometry leads you into this secret. It keeps on actually activating this spiral, this power in you. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, I'm really happy to stay and to answer your questions. But yeah. Also, any kind of feedback is really welcome.
I think it was very inspiring, if I can say, you know, because I'm very interested in it. So I'm just very inspired by it. I see that children like it very much. So I'm teaching children, and yesterday I was teaching them to draw the cube, and it's amazing. I mean, they get so, and I think it's very necessary for us to learn to work with this material in schools and everything.
Beautiful. Yeah. And
Because,
in a
yeah,
sense, we cannot escape, geometry is all around us, just look at your computer. It has a shape and colors it's something we cannot escape. And we're just playing with the fundamental stuff that
yeah, I'm a choreographer, and I'm looking to the origin of movement and dance, and I'm finding like Plato and Socrates. I mean, these are the Platonic fields, eh? And I mean, it brings us to our essence, to our soul.
Yes.
So I'm very inspired. Thank you
Yes,
so much.
I also call light language the language of the soul. It's very
Yeah.
much a level at which we are communicating from this energetical aspect.
Yeah, and I mean, very into the Ayurveda, like the Vedic culture, but Ether is Akasha.
Yes.
So it's the fields of Akasha. I wonder if you know about those things, but I think the sun rays, like the rays of the sun, give us a lot of light information where we can protect ourselves from that which is not breathing. Not breathing, like the soul is breathing, but so many technical devices children hold in their hands are not breathing, and we are not feeding our children with those technical devices. It's
Yes,
amazing.
there are some materials like aluminium, which there are some things that doesn't allow actually for the spreading of, that doesn't allow for the compression of charge to actually happen, and which actually stops, for consciousness to somehow connect and evolve in that natural way. Yeah, so there is some physics that does say what does allow more of this process to evolve and what doesn't. And for that, I can highly recommend you to watch the videos of Dan Winter.
Okay, thank you.
So you're
So
asking, one second. Antonio is asking if the golden ratio occur between the rates of change wavelength in various dimensions. So the golden ratio, for me, as I understand it, the golden ratio happens in the physical reality. It doesn't happen in the other dimensions, as I understand it. And it's a pathway that happens within the physical reality, and it's a pathway that happens on the torus. So it's not between the rates of change and wavelength. I think you're talking about the frames per second. I think about the Planck length. Correct me if I'm wrong, but basically it's this torus. It's like turning onto itself. As I understand it, it's because it turns onto itself. That is the spin rate, and that creates an experience of time. But like the number of rates of Planck time within a second is not necessarily the time that is happening as we experience it. Thank you, Sylvia. Yes. Enjoy. Does that answer your question, Antonio? Yeah, cool. Cool. Lovely. Yeah, and I'm also curious what if there are any reflections, maybe curiosities that are maybe still alive. Feedback. Yeah, and I invite you as well to, you want to say something, Catherine?
Ja, also einfach vielen Dank und es war ein sehr interessanter Einblick. Es ging mir aber ein bisschen zu schnell. Also es waren so viele Informationen,
Yes.
dass ich jetzt gar keine Fragen habe,
Yeah, cool.
sondern dass
Okay.
ich das zuerst irgendwie so verarbeiten muss.
Yes. And thank you for saying that. And I did this presentation at this speed the other day to my mom, and it took 3.5 hours. And I have really a lot to share and other ideas that are really powerful and cool. I don't know. Maybe I need to open up a class about it. And I wanted to say that I have also my Instagram account, where I just recently started, and I'm posting about all the topics that I've shared today in a more open and easy and step-by-step process. And if you want to follow me and see what I'm going to share, then feel free. Here at Instagram is bloominfinity_8. Also, if you're interested for a light language class, please reach out. Let's find how we can weave together a beautiful teaching with maybe others, maybe alone. Let us see. And if there is nothing more, then I wish you all the best. I wish you a lot of harmony and golden ratios and cosmic music into your flesh and bones.
Same. Thank you so much.
Danke vielmals.
Namaste.
Yeah. Thank you all so much, and have a lovely evening.